In this program, we are going to deal with the anatomy of vision and some common eye problems that are easily corrected. Then, we will try to understand the difficulties scientists encounter in their attempts to reproduce human sight. We often have the impression that the information our visual perceptions give us about our surroundings is accurate. However, they are often deceptive. Our knowledge of the world plays a crucial role in our perceptions. It's because an object is familiar to us and that we have a mental image of it that we are able to identify it, even if we only see it in part. And if our brain receives information that contradicts what it knows, it refuses to accept it. For example, we are unable to visualize a concave face because our brain tells us that it is highly unlikely. Our brain puts all kinds of complex mechanisms into play to interpret the information it receives. But as a rule, the raw material it obtains comes through that unique entrance, the eye. Admire a starlit night. Find our way in a forest. Drive a car. We could do none of these things if it were not for one of the most complicated processes in the living world, sight. Sight depends on two extremely sophisticated organs, the eye and the brain. The eye's job is to receive visual information from the surrounding world, the brain's to analyze and translate that information. The eye is very similar in its conformation and operation to a camera. Rays of light from an object enter the eye through a transparent layer, the cornea. They then go through the pupil, a dark opening in the middle of the iris. Like the camera's diaphragm, the pupil dilates or contracts automatically to regulate the amount of light entering the eye. The light then traverses the crystalline lens, which is rounded. After passing through the cornea and the lens, it focuses on a precise spot of the retina, the fovea. Like a picture shows up on a photographic film, the image projected onto the fovea is upside down in relation to the object. It is the brain that, interpreting the image, makes us see it upright. The retina is covered with cells that are sensitive to light, called cones and rods, which both contain colored pigments. When these pigments are touched by light, their molecules divide. This biochemical reaction triggers the signal that goes to the brain. The rods are 500 times more sensitive than the cones. They are particularly useful at night when there is little brightness. After being in a dark room for a while, the rods go into action. This is why we are then able to see objects we didn't perceive when we first entered the room. The cones are sensitive to the various wavelengths that make up light. It's thanks to them that we perceive colors. There are 3 types of cones. The first are sensitive to red. the second to green, and the third to blue. The signals emitted by the three types of cones respectively assess the proportions of red, green, and blue in each color, so we are able to distinguish an almost infinite range of colors. For them to work, however, the cones require bright light, which explains why we distinguish colors less clearly as the light declines. At night, everything seems gray. The signals from the millions of cones and rods are then conveyed via a network of thin nerve endings to the two optic nerves. These crisscross, then reach a particular part of the brain called the visual cortex. Information coming from the left side of an image is perceived by the right side of the visual cortex, and vice versa. The cortex is where the billions of electric impulses sent by the eye every second are decoded and analyzed to form a picture. Scientists still ignore, in essence, how this enormously complex task is carried out. What is certain is that the image that forms on the retina is quite different from the one we really see. It is simply an assembly of meaningless light spots. On the basis of this information alone, the cortex deduces the various characteristics of the objects observed, the lines, movements, colors. By uniting and comparing the images perceived by both eyes, the cortex also assesses the object's contours and depth. To interpret visual information, the brain also calls upon acquired knowledge and the visual context. In doing so, however, it can be mistaken. Thus, these two lines may measure exactly the same length, but they appear unequal because our brain is influenced by their visual surroundings, the open or closed arrowheads. The brain's tendency to interpret images in their real context is so strong that some images seem impossible. Finally, the image, decoded and interpreted by the visual cortex, is transmitted to the cerebral cortex. The image will then produce emotions we can then respond to appropriately. Basically, while the eye is of course indispensable to the marvelous process of vision, the brain is just as indispensable. The eye looks, but it's the brain that sees. Proof of that is that when you look at a person you love, or a picture of that person, it triggers an emotional and psychological reaction quite different from the one you feel when you look at a stranger. Physiologically, how the eye works can be summarized very simply. Based on a three-dimensional world, the eye produces on the retina a two-dimensional upside-down image, which the brain sets right side up and in 3 dimensions. Seeing. There's nothing quite so natural. And yet some visual defects, such as myopia and astigmatism, are among our most common handicaps. Fortunately, they are easily corrected. The human eye is one of the most refined organs there is. Normally, its accuracy is such that it can distinguish from a distance of 5 meters a spot whose diameter measures no more than 1.5 millimeters. However, this high-precision instrument can sometimes go wrong. Visual acuity then decreases considerably. By traversing the transparent parts of the eye, the cornea, the aqueous humor, the crystalline lens, and the vitreous body, light from an object is focused on the retina to form an image. The change of the light's course, essential to the functioning of the eye, is a property universal to transparent materials called refraction. When rays of light pass through one matter to another, for instance, from air to glass, it is deviated. If the material they go through is convex, the rays will focus at some distance beyond it, called focal distance or length. The focal length of a normal eye corresponds exactly to the length of the eyeball, which is an average of 24 millimeters. Owing to this close conformity, normally the eye should be able to form a clear image of remote objects with little effort. The light from these objects focuses precisely on the retina. The eye can also obtain a clear image of nearby objects by modifying the curvature of its crystalline lens. This automatic mechanism, similar to that of a camera, enables us to see objects from 10 kilometers to less than 30 centimeters away. The slightest deregulation of this precision instrument prevents the formation of clear images and alters vision. Fortunately, the light refraction property of transparent materials can also be used to correct most visual problems. Thus, at 8 or 10 years of age, some people have difficulty seeing distant objects. This problem, called myopia or nearsightedness, is caused by a slight lengthening of the eyeball or by a slightly increased curvature of the cornea. In both cases, the image of distant objects does not form in the retina itself, but slightly in front of it. Myopia, however, can be easily corrected with concave lenses. Thinner in the middle than at the edges, these lenses diverge the rays of light so that the image will be focused on the retina. Conversely, hypermetropic or long-sighted persons have excellent distant vision, but cannot focus well on nearby objects. Their eyeballs are too short, or their corneas not sufficiently rounded, and the image forms slightly behind the retina. To correct this defect, convex lenses are used to strengthen the eye and bring the image back onto the retina. As people age, their vision of objects close to them weakens. This visual weakness, called presbyopia, or more commonly, farsightedness, results from a hardening of the crystalline lens, and the eye can no longer focus on nearby objects. This defect can be corrected as well with another type of convex lens. Another eye problem, astigmatism, affects vision whatever the distance. In persons who are astigmatic, the curvature of their corneas is too pronounced in one way than in the other. Two images are then formed, causing blurred vision. Normal vision can be restored with cylindric glasses placed perpendicular to the corneal deformation. Since the invention of eyeglasses, the correction of visual defects has made giant strides. Thanks to modern manufacturing techniques, high-precision contact lenses can now be made with exactly the desired curvature. More recently, the correction of visual impairments has entered the field of surgery. A new technique, radial keratotomy, reduces and sometimes eliminates moderate myopia. Using the fine point of a diamond, the ophthalmologist reduces the curvature of the cornea by tracing grooves on it. 90% of the persons having undergone radial keratotomy surgery say they are happy with the results. Thanks to the success of radial keratotomy, we can hope that one day soon, most visual defects will be able to be corrected by surgery. Any picture, even the most fanciful, represents something that was first seen before being reproduced or recreated. Sight is so very complicated and subjective. How then can we possibly talk about artificial vision? When scientists were just beginning to ponder artificial intelligence, there was very little interest in reproducing the sensory faculties of man. They were thought to have too little to do with intelligence. Today, reproducing human vision has become a technological priority. All intelligence, be it natural or artificial, must have the ability to be in touch with the real world. It is no longer just a question of seeing, but of interpreting the information received. At present, robots can already recognize objects and compare them to models stored in their memory. But what are they able to do faced with the diversity of the real world? More and more manufacturers are turning to inexhaustible and meticulous workers for special jobs, robots. Not too long ago, because only they could see the objects they were handling, human beings would carry out the more complicated work. But leading-edge research, bordering on engineering and biology, nurtures a daring dream to give machines the most complex of our senses, sight. Thus, in a number of industries, automatic soldering is done thanks to artificial vision. One of the devices used consists of a camera directed toward the joint to be soldered and a blowtorch. The images the camera takes 15 times per second are forwarded to an image analyzer. The analyzer first measures the intensity of the thousands of spots of light in each image. It then submits the data to a series of mathematical calculations to evaluate the shape, size, and even the temperature of the steel bath created by the soldering. The information is then transmitted to a computer, which continuously adjusts soldering temperature and speed to the variations of the steel bath. With this system of artificial vision, soldering pipes is done 5 times faster than by hand. It also greatly improves the quality of the soldering. Buoyed by these encouraging results, researchers are now attempting to equip robots with artificial sight to enable them to perform more complicated tasks like locating, identifying, and picking up objects. To accomplish this, the robot is fitted with a special laser camera. The laser beam scans the object. The resulting image, received by the camera, pinpoints the object's distance and depth. The data is forwarded to the robot's servo systems, which guide the arm toward the object. Although such a task may appear simple to us, enormous computing power is needed to execute it, and it takes several computers working together to make it possible. Scientists are trying to develop even more sophisticated image analysis systems so as to eliminate the laser. The image analyzers break down the picture of an object into various shades of gray. They then make a great many mathematic computations in order to trace the contours of the object and evaluate its depth. They then reconstruct, bit by bit, the 3 dimensions of the object. Such an image processing system, able to analyze an object's specifications in 3 dimensions in less than a second, will be installed on the Space Shuttle's telemanipulator arm. Research on artificial vision is constantly providing outlets for new applications. For example, artificial vision can help analyze the movement and shape of immune cells in a blood sample. When the sample contains cancerous cells, the immune cells take on different movements and shapes. Analysis of pictures of such cells could help obtain diagnoses of cancers that would be more certain and automatic. Researchers are also working on the development of new image captors, such as infrared cameras capable of obtaining pictures of the temperatures of objects and detecting hidden faults in them. But one of the most important things that research on artificial vision has taught us is that we may never be able to imitate the complexity and perfection of human sight. Drawing in perspective is something that began in the Western world, and relatively recently. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the laws of perspective were established in order to make paintings as realistic as possible. But then, what is reality?